Hello, everyone. My name is Sam Pratt. I'm so excited that you're joining us today. Welcome to the Capacity Institute and Capacity Building Institute. I am so excited because I get to spend time with a dear friend of mine by the name of Dan Brunette. You're going to love him if you don't know him already. He is a wealth of information. One of my favorite things for those people that join us regularly know that I love knowing where we're coming from. We've had people from all over the world join us literally. And I love to see what part of Canada, of course, you're coming from as well. So feel free to throw in the chat there where you're coming from today. I'll tell you, I'm coming from the beautiful, sunny Ottawa today. And of course, we're on Algonquin and Anishinaabe territory, the unceded and unsurrendered territory of the Anishinaabe Algonquin people. And I'd love to know where you're coming from today. We've got lots to get to today. I think Dan and I, this is only an hour. That's going to be tough for Dan and I. We have a lot to talk about. But we're going to get lots in today. I'd like to introduce you, the glue that keeps us together. The one and only Hannah Rockburn joins us. Hello, Hannah.
So for those who may not know me yet, I am Hannah Rockburn, and I'm currently the operations manager for the Peace and Environment Resource Center, which is also based in Ottawa, Ontario. And we serve as the charitable partner for Sustainable Capacity Solutions, where we help provide resources, training, and networking opportunities for the programs that they're delivering. And starting in February of this year, the Capacity Building Institute is officially becoming a program under Sustainable Capacity Solutions. So this exciting transition allows us to continue delivering our comprehensive training and coaching and mentorship to nonprofit staff and volunteers nationwide. So with our mission to provide equal opportunity and access to capacity building training for all environmental leaders across Canada, this move will help strengthen our commitment to making high quality support more accessible for all of you guys. So through our tailored training, we empower individuals and organizations at every stage of their journey, whether that be just coming into the nonprofit sector as an intern or a more senior executive director. We equip them with the skills and knowledge to drive that lasting environmental change. And our approach focuses on 6 core themes that I'm sure many of you have heard from us by now. So we focus on financial management, governance and board development, volunteer engagement in human resources, communications and outreach, risk management and legal issues, and lastly, leadership and organizational culture. So right now you are part of one of our free monthly capacity building webinar series. So this is a great resource for expanding your knowledge and helping strengthen your network. And these sessions take place on the 3rd Tuesday of each month from 4 to 5 p.m. Eastern. And the other just designed to enhance your capacity building literacy and having that practical and relatable manner with these different topics. Beyond our webinars, we're also actively training over 50 youth across Canada in developing their nonprofit leadership skills. So they're supporting over 30 different organizations, grassroots NGOs, all across Canada between now. They started in February and they're going to be doing some volunteer work all the way up until May. And through this program, they are receiving one-on-one mentorship and coaching. They're building their professional networks, and they're also gaining top-tier training from our incredible experts. So we are very fortunate to have a fantastic roster of trainers and coaches that do support our programs. And we also have new connections and guest speakers that join us each year. So their expertise helps ensure that we continue delivering the top quality training and coaching to all of you. So some of our lead trainers are Sam LaPrade, who's hosting tonight's webinar, but we also have Rob Barnes, who has over 10 years of experience in the sector, Barb King, who's a seasoned leader in management. She's the former executive director of Watersheds Canada. We also have our very own Alex Keenan, who specializes with communication strategies, and you'll actually be hearing from her next month. And we have Dwayne Taylor, who's also been dedicated to helping nonprofits for over a decade in relation to diversity, equity, and inclusion, who we had earlier on this year. So we are grateful for all of their contributions and just excited to continue learning from them as well. And thanks to the generosity of our funders and supporters, like Sam, we are able to subsidize the training. So this makes it more accessible to leaders of small grassroots organizations that often would miss out on these professional development opportunities due to just financial restrictions and barriers. So their support just ensures that the vital capacity building opportunities are remaining inclusive and affordable and impactful for your organizations that are in the weeds doing the environmental change within the community. And as always, we encourage you to reach out, learn more about the training opportunities, whether that be involved as a participant or maybe you would like to be a guest speaker or coach with our programs. You can sign up to our shared monthly newsletter. You can scan the QR code if you would like, or you can just go to our website to sign up. That will give you updates on everything that's going on, including upcoming sessions. Alternatively, you can just connect with us through email, our website. You can actually call me on the phone number there and we'll be able to have a chat as well. And if you happen to be in Ottawa, you can always visit us in person. We have an office space in the basement of the Rideau Park United Church that you could always come see us with. And I'll also say to save the date for the upcoming webinar. So as mentioned, we do this monthly. Our next month in April 15th, we're having Alex Keenan come in to talk about communication with volunteers. And then we have Mina Dawes coming in May about integrating AI to streamline for nonprofits. So this will be a continuation, a little bit of the ethics webinar that we had back last year. And then in June, we will have a panel from different community and family foundations. And so that will be a really great one to attend in June about a family foundation panel. With that, I will pass it back to Sam to get started with our webinar today.
Always a pleasure to work with you. We've got Montreal checking in. Hi, Chantel. Thanks so much for being here. Now it has come to that time where I get to introduce a good friend of mine, and that is Dan Brunette. Dan, of course, is a Senior Director, External Affairs, Co-operatives and Mutuals Canada. Hi, Dan.
Hey, Sam. Good
It's
to see you.
wonderful to see you. We see each other. Our lives have crisscrossed over many, many years, and this is so fun to have you here today.
Glad to be here.
So
Thank
let's
you.
start off because I know when you started your new role, I bumped into you and I'm like, okay, tell me about this organization because I didn't really know about it. So let's start there.
All right. Well, my new role is outside of the charitable sector per se, but it is involved with Co-operatives and Mutuals Canada, which is the national apex body for all things co-op and mutual, which is the enterprise model that is slightly different than the traditional one, but certainly has proven its worth through the years and can be found in just about every industrial sector.
And you have a really impressive resume. I've been able to follow your journey over many, many years. You've done lots of stuff. Give us a little taste, Dan, of what you've accomplished.
Oh, well, thank you. Basically, it really comes down to doing what I can to build a better world, whether that's work or that's from a volunteer point of view. So those who know me usually know me as a sort of serial volunteer and numerous boards and committees. But the first 20 years of my career was basically spent on the fundraising and or grant making side of things. And then I've also had a chance to not only work at the Ottawa Community Foundation, but spend a week in Haiti helping set up the Haiti Community Foundation, and also being one of the founders of the Philanthropy Outaouais, which is the community foundation right across the river where I live in Gatineau.
It's fantastic. And I love it because our topic today is navigating funder types and new grant rules for charities. I would have loved this seminar about 30 years ago because that's when I really, really needed it. But things evolve and change, Dan, and I think that's why it'll be a refresher for some people today, but it'll be brand new information for some people today. So
Absolutely.
give us a landscape. What does the landscape here in Canada look like when it comes to nonprofits and charities?
Yeah, no, absolutely. So in essence, there's 86,000 registered charities. So entities that have a number, entities that need money. There are some very large ones, there are very small ones. However, that only counts for those that are charitable entities by law. There's a number of other entities called other qualified donees, which can also give charitable tax receipts, but there's specific rules around them. We were talking about national sport bodies, so Kayak Canada and so on, but There's also Quidditch Canada, which is Muggle Quidditch, by the way, but they do have their qualified donee status. There's municipalities, UN bodies, and so on. So you're talking about probably 90,000 entities that give charitable receipts. There's further about 75,000 not-for-profit entities, most of which are also looking for money. They just can't give a tax receipt, but that doesn't mean that they're not doing great work. And that could be, your local, little league baseball team. It could be your local sports organization or youth program. Some just choose not to go out and do the extra paperwork required to get charitable status because it does bring an extra layer of activity. However, there's a lot of fantastic not-for-profits out there.
And we sort of, when I was actually talking to an organization today that's kind of new to fundraising, and I'm a very visual person, so I was kind of, here's the buckets that kind of money come from. Really, there's four main buckets. Walk us through what those four are. We know, of course, as individuals, we can give a gift, so we'll start there. We've got individuals. Walk me through a little bit of that, Dan.
So most people, honestly, when they start in fundraising, because very few people actually wake up in the morning going, "Ooh, I want to fundraise today. I want to go ask people for money."
So true.
So if I can just step back, first I'll say that what I like to tell people is fundraising, regardless of the source, is just basically you bringing together a worthy cause with people or entities with money. And that's really what fundraising is all about. And that's why it's a very interesting, albeit sometimes stressful activity. But it is really what allows some of the projects, to find their financing. But individuals are certainly a large source of money. Those individuals might be entrepreneurs, they might be business owners, they may have inherited the money, but at the end of the day, it's people and families that are actually sitting around the same table. You have other foundations. So Hannah mentioned there is a conference coming up, which I invite everybody to attend around community and private and family foundations. So of the 86,000 charities that exist out there, there are 75,000 of them that are frontline charities doing work. Then there's 10,000 of them that are foundations, and it's basically split right down the middle. Half are private foundations, half are public foundations. The main difference between the three is that if you're a foundation, you need to give more than half of your money away as grants to other charities and qualified donees. If you're a charitable enterprise or a charitable entity, you actually do most of the work yourself. They're your own activities. And that's really the dividing line. If you're looking at foundations, however, a private foundation will have people that are usually connected either through family ties or business ties together, calling the shots. And if it's a public foundation, that's more of a broad-based community representation in terms of the selection process. So there's advantages, pros and cons to both, but the foundation aspect is certainly a one to explore. Then you'd be looking also at the sort of corporate world and partnerships and so on. And yes, people think that the businesses have all the money, but most businesses are interested in selling widgets and getting marketing visibility and growing. So I would actually look at who are the individuals behind the companies usually, and who are the investors and so on, as they may choose to influence some grant making from the corporate side, but they might also just choose to do it out of their left pocket, right pocket, investment shares, or regardless. And of course, the last one, which alternatively can be looked at either, is it fundraising or is it just grant making per se? But municipal, provincial, and the federal government bodies are actually very important grant makers that should not be underestimated. Sometimes if you can survive a government application, you can survive everything. But at the end of the day, if you have a clear idea of what you're trying to accomplish and you've done a good business plan and a good proposal and all your numbers match and so on, you should be able to find funding for whatever you're looking for. So those would be the main categories I would lump things into.
And I think, they're so different the way we approach each of those
Yes.
groups. And I think the one thing I think they have in common, and you can correct me, is how important it is to tell the story. That,
Yes.
no matter what, it's a human at the end of the day that will be reviewing and deciding. So you want to create that emotional, story behind what you're doing and show the impact on humans, right?
Oh, absolutely. And that's it is a relationship cycle. So whether people are getting to know you in the first place, or that you're progressing and next thing you know, your neighbor's talking to their other friend that they met at a grocery store, and they say, "Oh, well, I heard Sam talking about this great project or something. You know anything about it?" And if they've heard stories, if they've heard it from other people, then that'll add to your credibility. But at the end of the day, what you want is for your staff, your board members, your volunteers to have a sort of a common basic story so that that can be shared, but they can also link into, why they're involved, right? The reason why I'm involved with the cause might be very different than why you, Sam, or Hannah are involved with the cause. But at the end of the day, we all play a role and we all have a story to tell, which is our story as part of a much broader one.
Hmm. And with everything happening in the world, I just keep telling anyone that'll listen when it comes to fundraising is we just have to be consistent. We just have to keep asking, keep appealing. Yes, we hear about tough economic challenges. We hear about sort of some of the nonsense south of the border, some of those challenges. But at the end of the day, we have to keep being strategic about the fundraising. It can't
Yes.
just be, well, we'll sit here. It's kind of like, staying in your couch to see if you're going to be dating anyone, right? It's the same thing, right? You're not going to find anyone on your couch. You need to get out there.
Well, it's interesting you bring that up because I actually once did a presentation on comparing the fundraising cycle to the dating cycle,
Oh,
and how the blind date, the blind date can be seen as that sort of discovery meeting, that first time you actually interact with a donor, and then you have the cultivation phase where they get to know you, you get to know them, and then you have the first ask and so on and so forth. But yes, at the end of the day, like I said earlier, it is relationship based, but it is something as well where ideally what you want, you might not be the top organization on somebody's charitable list, but you'd want to be in the top 3 or 4, because regardless of how the fundraising climate is, people will usually still support their top 3 or 4. It might not be at the level they want, might not be at the level you're hoping, but it certainly is where the sweet spot is, if you like, in terms of impact. And how those donors come into the door in the first place can be as varied as there are trees out there. So
and there's lots of work being done, especially because of course COVID 5 years ago, about kind of what a crisis does to fundraising. And people step up, Dan. Like
yep.
when I analyze, I analyze data for lots of organizations, and I see constantly those that kept asking saw the results. Those that were like, we can't ask, it's COVID, their
No.
results dipped. I mean, that's just the reality. So, in any crisis or any sort of time that we are experiencing that might feel like rough waters, it's
Mhm.
never a better time to actually, you know, kind of bed down and get in the weeds.
Oh, absolutely. And 2 points that I'd like to follow up on what you just said. One is the importance of data. So, not only understanding, your data, how much you've raised and so on, but where those donors come from. And for me personally, it's much better to have one donor who gives $100 per year for 10 years than one donor who gives $1,000 once, because the other one shows loyalty, right? It shows that they actually understand the cause and they make the conscious decision. It's not just being invited to a fundraising breakfast or something and giving because your table captain asked you to do it. So understanding your data and your points, so that subject matter expertise, will also allow you to differentiate how you compare. So if you're in Ottawa, for example, and there's donors out there that want to support youth, well, there might be the Boys and Girls Club, there's the Ottawa Youth Bureau, there's Christie Lake Kids, there's a bunch of fantastic causes,
Mhm.
YMCA, right? There's a bunch of fantastic causes, but at the end of the day, how are they different? What's the unique value proposition for each? And again, that links into your stats, your data, your storytelling as well.
Absolutely. And I get to ask Dan all the questions right now, but we're wanting to encourage you as well to populate that Q&A area. If you've got a question for Dan, we'll be taking those shortly as well. There's so many, opportunities to fundraise in different ways. And I think what I keep sort of hearing from people is there's a lot of things that kind of feel like squirrel, you got to look over here and focus there. But the connection to donors, that strong, you've mentioned the word before, relationship building, it can be monotonous. It can feel like maybe you're not doing enough, but it's that consistency, that messaging, strategic messaging to donors. Talk to me a little bit about your experience there, Dan.
Well, what I would actually say is there's obviously you cannot focus on everybody you want to talk to.
Mhm.
So before launching any type of fundraising plan, and yes, any organization or individual should have a fundraising plan on who to approach, it's important to understand your capacity first. Because if you're going to try to maintain a relationship with 250 different people or entities, you're likely going to burn out, and you're going to burn out your volunteers. So, stats have shown, a full-time fundraiser involved in major gifts, you're looking at about 100 files in their portfolio. And that is people that are new to the conversation, people that have known you for years, but you need to steward and maintain that relationship, because it is a cycle, right? It's not, Sam, thank you for your $1,000 gift, I'll talk to you next year when I actually need more, right? So it is, you have to keep the person updated and in the loop and so on. But any fundraising plan should really have 3 different groups of categories of people. The first is what we call the annual giving, which can be those squirrel things, the social media. Oh, I'm doing a walk for this, or this and that, which honestly brings, is successful, brings in money, but it's the small gifts that together will actually have a big impact. And that includes everything from going to the local spaghetti supper, to the social media, to the kids a hockey team and bottle drive. So there's many different scenarios, but those are more time consuming, but they offer you a great breadth. The major gift is actually where it's most cost efficient to fundraise, which is basically where people will make large contributions. Now, the one thing the little asterisk I put on there is that what you define as a major gift might not be what the person defines as a major gift, right? So if I'm, inherited wealth and I used to own half of Mount Royal in Montreal, odds are that, making $1,000 gift to something is pocket change. However, as a father of 2, one of which is post-secondary, it's likely not in my same bandwidth to give $1,000 to all the charities that I like. So that's on the donor side, but on the organizational side, it's very different as well. So when I worked at the University of Ottawa, in order to be in the major gift pool, it was entities that would look at for more people and individuals for more than $25,000 a year. When I worked at the Ottawa Boys and Girls Club, because we were very event heavy, anybody who gave more than $500 outside of events was looked at as having sort of more major gift potential and requiring a bit more attention. So it can be very, very nuanced. And the third group is what we call legacy giving, which is usually people either through their will or through life insurance and so on will make commitments that will outlive them, whether it's for legacy planning or whatever the reasons. The idea is that those individuals are usually the ones that are closest to your organizations and know the long-term importance. So the volunteers have been there for 25, 30, 40 years. And, just like fundraising, it involves money and it involves death, 2 things that are taboo and people don't like to talk about. However, the reality is the death rate is still 100%. It will be for a long time, and you can't take it with you. So if somebody comes to you and says, I would like to leave the ABC charity in my will, then by all means you should feel very honored because they're making that commitment. I would not flip it around and say, go to your volunteers and say, hey, how about leaving us in your will, in a very blunt manner? That'll turn people off. However, you can actually share stories of people that have left legacy gifts in your newsletters. Again, back to the storytelling that you mentioned, Sam. We're very honored that Sam, during her lifetime, was an active volunteer and left us, some money to perpetuate the Women in Philanthropy Awards or something like that, right? So that storytelling can inspire other people to think about it. And the last thing I would say is, regardless if you're annual, major, or legacy gift donor, very few people have the prime motivation as being the charitable tax receipt. It's they want to have an impact, and that's where it can be very interesting for all the the 75,000 nonprofits that don't have charitable status. It's about the cause. It's about what you're accomplishing and what you're doing, not necessarily about a tax sheet. Granted, if you're giving 6-figure gifts, the tax sheet might play a more important role in your decision-making process. But don't worry about that. Convince the individual, convince the foundation to give you funding. They will figure out on their side how and when they can actually make it happen.
And how important is it for us to ensure that this doesn't feel transactional? You mentioned you already get your $1,000 next year. Kind of that kind of feels like an oil change, right? We don't want to feel like an oil change, Dan.
No. And that actually makes me think of the story of, you don't want to be that slick oil, slick used car salesman, which is often a misconception of what fundraisers are, or arm twisting, or that vulture, or ambulance chasers. That's not it at all.
Yeah.
What it is, again, back to the whole storytelling and relationship, if you're involved with the charity that is fighting cancer or something, well, you have your annual reports, you have the survivor stories, you have things that you can share. Some people might be very open to have more activities or more contacts. Some might say, you know what, I know what I want to do, and I'm supporting you. But really, again, it's a cycle where people are kept in the loop. They feel that they're not taken for granted as longtime donors. They feel involved. They know the impact of their gifts, and they feel that they're part of something bigger.
Yeah, no, it's a really good point. I know when I was with the Legion National Foundation, I was there for 5 years, and we got the notice, of course, that the federal government had opened up the opportunity for us to give gifts to non-qualified donees.
Yes.
We walked the board through this. We sort of set a cap, gave them some ideas of some of the people that had already come to ask for monies, and they were in that category. The really important part for us, we did give one $20,000 gift during my time there. The really important part for me was ensuring that everybody was comfortable with the language. This is very new. The federal government, to be honest, I mean, I respectively still figuring it out as well. So I
Mhm.
think it's part and parcel of some education we can do today, what that looks like. Talk to me about that.
Well, absolutely. And for that's actually building on some advocacy and enabling conversation that's been going on for a long while around the fact that there's a lot of entities that don't have charitable status that are doing great work, and that you can trust the foundations and other charities to actually look for the greater, the impact on the greater good, if you like. So historically, until a few years ago, you could grant to non-qualified donees, and you could give money. However, the rules were very strict. If it was over $1,000, which obviously it's great for bursaries and so on, but you can't really launch a new program with that. But what the government basically was looking at, and still looks at, is as a charity, you need to either do grant it to another charity, and the fiduciary responsibility for making sure those tax receipted dollars are used for good purposes goes to the other charity that's implementing it, or you do your own activities. And those own activities are basically the government or CRA wants to make sure that the charity that has issued the receipt is actually still offering some what they call direction and control over the dollars. So if you're giving 5, 10, $20,000 to a non-charity to do some work that aligns with your mandate, then you're not giving it a lump sum. You might give it 5K, get a report and follow up and so on. But at the end of the day, the easiest way I like to explain is, let's say you're involved with a charity in Burkina Faso, for example, an orphanage. It doesn't make sense for me as a staffer to take a plane, go over there, buy a bulldozer, plow, get everything. So you're doing a contract, and that's basically the same thing when you're talking about your own activities. Is you're working with partners or other stakeholders that have an aligned mission with you, and because of their subject matter expertise or structure, you're basically working with them to help fulfill your own vision and mission. And that can be as broad as the 86,000 different charities that exist out there. It's specific to every charity, but 100%, Sam, I agree. The board needs to be comfortable with it, especially since it's relatively new in terms of the extra flexibility.
Yeah, 100%. We've got a question from Angela today asking about links to the CRA guiding documents. So
Yep.
I know Hannah's usually on those things pretty quick, so we can pop something in the chat for that. But I think reviewing that, and I think the point I want to make about the CRA, I think many of us, in our culture, it's like you're kind of scared to call the CRA. The reality is, I have called them and asked them so many questions over the years. They're so helpful
Yep.
because I've had board members, say to me, "Oh, I'm going to give you these bottles of wine and this is how much they're worth and I want a tax receipt." And I'm like, that doesn't feel right. Things like that have come up, and I've had, just different questions about tax receipts or, legacy giving or this new sort of direction in terms of non-qualified donees. I have found them to be absolutely so helpful. So I think I want to bust that myth today, Dan, that calling the CRA is a punitive thing or a negative thing.
Yeah. Oh, and I would 100% agree with you're saying. Yes, there's a charities directorate that handles it, and yes, that They will be hesitant to provide you with a formal sort of written recommendation without going through legal channels, but that's perfectly normal. The key thing I would like to mention is that CRA takes an education first approach. So as you said, it's not punitive. It is, we will help you do your good work. Here are the rules and guidelines. Just about everything you might ask, whether it's frequently asked questions or things like that, is freely available in both official languages on the CRA website. Honestly, if you can't find what you're looking for, send me an email. I'll help you find it. But at the end of the day, it's also something where most people don't realize this, but all charities, when you fill out your T3010, which is the mandatory declaration you need to do every year, that is public information. So if you just Google charities listing CRA charities listing, it'll take you to the list of the 86,000 charities. You can do an advanced search. You can search for keywords. But I would also encourage you, for any charity you're involved with, go and look, right? Make sure your charity actually, like the picture and the paperwork is usually filled out by the treasurer, who might not necessarily understand the nuances of the language. So I've had a few people be quite surprised that they were delivering youth programs, and it was because they were paying salaries, it was showing up as admin expenses or something like that, not part of their program. So do go online to Charities Directorate, query the charities in your neighborhood, query the charities that are established around the subject matter interests, and whether that's environment or that's other things, there's a lot of really good stuff out there that's free and
100%.
accessible.
100%. We talked about data. So of course we need a database. So we're talking about sort of those tools. I always like to refer to the database as the longest serving employee. It's probably
Yes.
been there since before you came, and it's going to be there after you. And how we treat that database is so crucial. What other sort of tools do we need as fundraisers, Dan?
Okay, well, on the database point, I would mention that everything that's in your database is open to access to information. So don't write anything like, oh, Sam Laprade is difficult to deal with. Maybe put something like, oh, speak to the ED before engaging with Sam or something like that, right? Because it could be detrimental. Not that anybody would ever write anything like that in the database. I'm just flagging it that it has happened elsewhere.
Yeah.
But yeah, there's a lot of different tools. Whether you're looking at, you can actually go out and pay for databases and tools and the grant databases, but a lot of that is freely available as well, right? So you can get a lot done. For example, the Charities Directorate that I mentioned, that also applies to the the foundations in Canada. So you can sit in front of your computer in your PJs with a glass of wine or a cup of coffee or something like that, and just Google keywords like environment or sustainability and stuff, and you'll see which foundations have that as part of their mandate. And then that allows you to filter down to your top 25 or something, something that's manageable in terms of your strategy and outreach. There's also a great database, which you also use the CRA information, but it's Mark Bloomberg, who's a Toronto area based lawyer, charitydata.ca. And that he also has built it in a way that actually allows a lot of keyword searches and so on. Those are two free resources that I've used extensively. But if you have the capacity, if you have the money, there are other tools that would allow you to actually pull up information that might be also interesting, such as what's have they supported similar organizations. But at the end of the day, the best place to find a fundraiser is in front of somebody else's donor wall. So because the people think that everybody's in the competition, but it's not. Usually, if there's a funder that's interested in supporting the environment or something, they will be quite open-minded around, where's the most impact? Where can it be leveraged? And is that climate change? Is that water preservation? At the end of the day, it doesn't. It's not exclusive, right? They're looking to have an impact, and they're looking to be helped to have the impact they want.
For sure. And we think about sort of those best practices as well. The word stewardship comes to mind. And I think so often when we look at donors that maybe only give one gift to an organization, many of them, are asked, well, why didn't you give again? And often they go, I wasn't asked again.
Yeah.
Right. So talk to me a little bit about best practices.
Yeah, well, you put your finger on the most common one, which is, have you even asked the first time, right? Some people are so hesitant to ask. I always say, what is the absolute worst case scenario that a non-donor will say to you? They'll say no. And will that change your life in any way? No, it will not. Right. So if you put all your eggs in that one big donor's basket, then that, could be problematic. But at the end of the day, you want to, not everybody's a philanthropist. Not everybody will care about your cause. And some people might say, well, you know what? I only give internationally because my money goes further. Others will say, I only give locally because it's my neighborhood, it's my community. Right. So people have different reasons or nuances, and that's also part of the stewardship. Is as you get to know your donors, you will be able to work with them to find what they're interested in. If it's very transactional, as was flagged before, then you're not reaching your goals. You might get the number goal, but it's going to be a one-time thing, and people are not going to be engaged. But donors can come in, out of left field, or they can come in from your boardroom or from a committee, or you never know. I actually don't have the stats to prove it, but I was once told that half the money that comes in for CHEO is actually people just hosting barbecues and events and giving the money to CHEO, which is the Children's Hospital of Eastern Ontario, fantastic cause. But what they've done is enabled like little toolkits and stuff on, hey, you want to host an event for us? Use this, right? Here's the information you need. So there's a million different ways to do it. But at the end of the day, you shouldn't wait on or thinking, gosh darn it, we're the best cause in the world, people will give us money. As you said, sitting on your couch hoping that the love of your life will show up. Same thing for fundraisers. There's no knight in shining armor coming in on a horse with bags of money just looking to give it out to you. You need to actually prepare a bit of the seeding plan.
For sure. If 25 years ago you and I met for, let's say, I don't know, lunch at Zeller's, what would you go back and tell you and I 25 years ago, Dan?
Hey, what's scary is I actually know what reference you're making in those little restaurants and Zellers.
I had to do that to you. Yeah.
Actually, and what comes to mind is actually what really happened, which I was new to fundraising. So my first job in the real world post university was working on the campaign to build a new Canadian War Museum. And I had no experience in fundraising, no experience in office work, but I had an interest in military history, and I had been a guide at the museum during my post-secondary education. So I knew the stories, I knew the vets and so on. And sort of got involved really early on, and I was bottom of the food chain in terms of the fundraising team there, but surrounded with some amazing volunteers. And it's actually our VP at the time, Mike Wolf, who you might remember. Mike said, you seem to be enjoying this whole fundraising thing, Dan. You should get involved with the Association of Fundraising Professionals. And I said, oh, okay. So I picked up the phone and basically called up the local chapter and basically said, look, I'm new, I'm keen, I don't know anything, but I'm happy to learn and happy to get involved. And with that, I became involved with the communications committee as a volunteer, where my role was twofold. One, to work with senior fundraising professionals to get their history for our hard copy newsletter that we used to mail out to everybody. And the second one was to develop one of those website things that the corporations had. So I didn't know, I don't have any technical ability. Long story short, found an Algonquin College student who was keen on developing her portfolio. I built the content. It'd be shameful compared to modern day websites. However, we launched it at Fundraising Day 2001. And that led into more than a decade of very active involvement with AFP, or close to 15 years, I would say. And all of my jobs have always been either linked, all my career advancement have always been either through volunteer work I've done or referrals from people. So that, to me, getting involved, learning about the legalities of work of the fundraising world, and that's also how I got into my current job, which was through AFP Government Relations Committee, being involved in some of the enabling conversations and policy making conversations with elected officials. I had gotten involved in the first place to actually get a better understanding what the rules are to protect my own donors. But then when you're involved in the policy work, you realize, oh, you know what, we can help enact change here and inform the people that are actually making the decisions. So that has helped sort of guide me throughout. So, it's always good to find a mentor or people that, encourage you along the way to get involved and broaden your horizons. But if you're going to be in the fundraising world as a volunteer or a staff, it can't be just transactional as an employee, and it can't be just because you want your resume to look good. You will not be happy. Your organization will not be happy. If you find something you care about, it's going to be amazing.
Yeah, I know it's great advice, Dan. And I think, just making that leap and asking for help and and then also contributing. It's really the best case scenario
Mhm.
to come out of any of that. I think that's great advice. What advice would you have for people that are maybe struggling right now, Dan, that, it's a tough fundraising world out there. There's so many competing priorities. The news is tough to listen to these days. Advice for our fundraising friends.
Yeah, well, my advice and my way to maintain my mental sanity is just go on the front line, leave the office, go see if you're doing, environmental charities and stuff like that, go out for a walk in the trails. And if you're doing, wetlands, go catch some frogs, reconnect to what the main purpose is, because
Mm-hmm.
that little fire will keep burning for a long time, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's the difference of, you know, oh yes, I run scholarships program versus yes, I was there and I shook the hand of the kid who got it, right? So that frontline experience to me is instrumental, because it also allows you to again get some news stories, right? Oh, I met this young kid over here who was the recipient of that award or something, and then you can regale that. So it'll keep at least in my case, it keeps the motivation going, keeps the energy going for sure.
For
But
sure.
yeah, it is difficult. But there's hard times, right? When the economic crash happened in 2008, stuff dried up. When the tech boom in Ottawa exploded, stuff dried up. So that also allows you to actually step back and look at, well, are we focusing on the right things, right? See it as an opportunity to refocus, redetermine, and see where the needs are. But you know, it, you know, keep on trucking. It'll get better. Thing.
Yeah, and I think too, if I can just add to that, just from my own personal experiences, I always continued my professional development.
Yes.
Which I find, and you mentioned a conference earlier. I'd love to know what that is, because I think it's important for us to kind of get a sense of the PD opportunities. I mean, today is obviously one, but those opportunities not only with CBI but elsewhere.
Yes, well, certainly it's just like anything else. There's tons of opportunities out there. Some are paid, some are free. Like Sam and I are happy to be here today and share what little wisdom we can, and hopefully help our 2 cents get you a lot more sense.
Yeah.
But the from a fundraising world, there is the Association of Fundraising Professionals, which is a network of usually full-time fundraisers, or people that are in the consulting world around fundraising. Um, there's international conferences as well, but every group, the Canadian Society of Association Executives will actually have stuff that's more focused on sponsorship, because they're very event heavy, right? So it really depends what you're trying to accomplish and where you're trying to also get your money from, right? Like if you're hosting an event and you're getting 50 cents on the dollar, it's a successful event, right? But the point of an event is also to figure out who's coming to the event, right? Can they be converted to regular donors and so on? So you
Mm.
need somebody on your team or yourself that enjoys events and that is really planning. I'm not the person to pick the napkin colors and the color themes and stuff. However, I know what I want to talk about. I know how to work the room, and I know how to connect some dots between individuals that might be interested in speaking to each other. So everybody's got their strength, and but that training is available out there, right? So to spend a bit of time, Googling. As I mentioned the website before, most organizations have a website now, so it's not early
Mhm.
2000s where it's still being set up. So do look out and just around the subject matter expertise side as well.
There was a conference I think you mentioned at the top of our time together today. Was it specifically around government funding or corporate funding?
Oh, that's what was actually I was just building on what Hannah mentioned. The
Okay.
CBI is putting together a session on I think it was private and community foundations, I think. Hannah, you feel free to jump in if you like, but I was honestly just echoing what Anna had said, because I was paying
Okay, fair
attention.
enough. Fair enough. We had a question. I wanted to make sure I answered that well. We have time for some questions now. Jim has already jumped in the Q&A with a great one. Encourage all of our attendees today. If you have a question for Dan, we do have 15 minutes, which we can get a lot done. So I'll read off Jim's question. We are a national charity and have started projects in several cities. Can we say that volunteers in those cities are part of our organization? Another question he includes, can our charitable status, insurance, etc., apply to those activities? Great question, quite in depth. Your
Yeah,
thoughts?
it's a fantastic question. And really, it depends, the wording that you use. So yes, definitely your frontline volunteers. Uh, from an insurance point of view, I'm not an insurance expert, but two things. One, there's the director's liability insurance, which your board members should have. So if something happens, they're not personally fiduciary responsible. They don't have the fiduciary responsibility for, the $4 million endowment you have or something like that. But the second one is your volunteers should be signed up through a proper registration process, in the sense that there's a volunteer manager, there's a listing somewhere, then they have preferably a police record check done and a vulnerable population check, depending if you're working with youth or seniors, for example. But all that, there is sort of volunteer insurance as well. But it comes down to how you define it, right? If it's just people putting on a golf tournament for you, then they're likely not volunteers. But certainly, I would 100% consider your volunteers as an integral part of your organization. And that's the bean counting insurance side versus the humanity side of me talking, right? So depends how you look at it and how you phrase your question and for what purpose you're asking that question.
Yeah, no, for sure. I think it's a really good point. And I think too, I always really relied on the constitution of the organization that was set up. And sometimes if an organization, if you weren't part of that, going back and looking at what you presented to CRA for the first time to be able to get your charitable status or your nonprofit status can provide a lot of insight.
Yes.
So that's another.
And if I just build on that, Sam, just for those of you that may have desires to get your charitable status, so in Canada, you need to fall under one of four categories. It actually goes back to Elizabeth the First, England, centuries ago, which you're basically doing relief of poverty, advancement of religion, advancement of education, or other purposes as defined by the courts. So that's where the environment, animals, and so on comes in. So when CRA is talking about your objects, that's what they're talking about, not the fact that you're going to be running events or giving scholarships or so on. They're like, where do you fall into the structure? And if I can just wrap back to the question around volunteers, one of the issues and one of the things you should clarify with your volunteers, especially if they're on the fundraising side, is do you have a decentralized body where you have sort of the Eastern Canada office and the Western Canada office and the Central Canada office? Because that will, if it's not clear, be a source of angst, frustration, possible tension. If you have a big donor that's based out of Halifax, but they give at the national office, and then for national projects, well, the Atlantic Canada office might say, well, what about us, right? They're our donor. We've been building relationships. So those nuances are very important to take care of internally if you have a national office.
What a great comment. And we know that federated model can have some of those intricacies for sure. One of the attendees today is asking, when dealing with individuals behind corporations and seeking those corporate partnerships, you want to obviously reach out to the individuals. The question is, do you treat them like an individual donor, or do you focus on the business benefits and corporate marketability, things like that? I certainly have my thoughts. I'd love yours, so Dan.
Well, my thoughts is just what exactly you're asking for. If you're looking for them to buy a table and fill, 8 to 10 people at a round table at a community event, then you're talking from business side, and you can play up the, corporate brand visibility and stuff like that, or slap the logo top right type of thing. And yes, some of their proceeds ends up going to the cause, but they're trying to sell widgets, right? They're trying to do something. So that's more of a business to business conversation. Whereas there's a big difference as well if you're approaching sort of a small business owner that's community based versus trying to approach IBM and the 17 levels of grant making committees that leads to the top, right? So that's a very big difference. And even like big businesses like Canadian Tire or something will have a cap on what they can give locally. Anything of over needs to go to the the regional or head office type of scenario. So again, it depends what you're asking for, and what angle, and I personally much prefer the philanthropic, love of humanity conversation rather than the sponsorship, business to business, slap your logo top right type of scenario. But there's a place for both in fundraising. You just need to be very clear. And it's also important for you as a charity, if you are giving sponsorship visibility or stuff for them, like a seat at a table or something like that, that is a sponsorship business to business that cannot be receipted. And you can get in a lot of trouble if you give tax receipts to sponsors.
Yeah, yeah, it's such a good point. And I'll just add to that from my own perspective is I think it's really important that we speak to the people behind corporations as people.
Oh,
So
yes.
it's not a big gray tall building in the middle of downtown Toronto, but speak to them definitely as individuals. But also it's really respectful to understand what they funded before
Mm-hmm.
and understand what their mandate is. I think too often, we might be working, let's say, with seniors, and we look at everything they've done. They have funded youth, they funded the environment, and they have funded guinea pigs. And then we're in there saying, you know what, but we're dealing with seniors, but they have never given to seniors before.
Yeah.
A lot of organizations and corporations have that philanthropic statement. So we want to make sure we respect that as well. And I
Yes.
think that's part of the rabbit hole we can go down in terms of our granting and our funding.
Yes, and certainly we could have another 4-day retreat just to talk about that.
Sure.
But it is something where corporate philanthropy is different than the individual philanthropy. So if you're the majority shareholder of a company, you might do your own thing with your family. You might have your private foundation or an anonymous fund at the local community foundation or whatever. But that's your private giving. Corporately, you may choose to give to youth because that's who buys your products, or or Lush is a very good example of they're very environmental. They fund a lot of environmental projects because they're meant to be environmentally friendly. That's also part of their brand. So again, it
Right.
depends if you're talking to the individual or the business and how you're looking at it. But I would always start with trying to talk to the individuals because it's a lot easier for the individual to say, oh well, my local office and stuff, will give, than trying to convince the local office to approach their owner to give personally. The other thing I would mention is just how people give and why. A bit to build on what you said, Sam. People have very different reasons for giving, and nobody's 100% in what category. But there's a great book that came out in '94 called I'm not sure if everybody on the call except Sam and I were alive in '94, but the it's called The Seven Faces of Philanthropy, and actually looked at what were the psychological motivations. And best way to see it is, if I'm somebody who you know went to the Boys and Girls Club and wants to give back to the Boys and Girls Club because it had an impact on my life, then I'm sort of repaying that gift. I'm repaying that forward. If somebody, for generations, my family has been supporting this cause, then that's sort of called a dynast, and the odds of that person stopping to give are very very small. However, the risk is that you'll take them for granted because it's been 4 or 5 generations. Or people that say, what, I support the LGBTQ community because I'm a member of the LGBTQ community, and that's where my funding goes. So it's more of a community approach. So understanding the underlying motivations for the people and why they would give to you is so important. And you will not know that through a transactional relationship. You have to sit down, you have to have coffee, you have to have a virtual call, you have to get to know the person, not the dollar sign. And that's so crucial because people can see through fake smiles and shiny cards and stuff.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Good point. A good friend of mine is on the call today. It's so great to see Christopher Mines jump in my webinar chat, and he's asking a fantastic question, one that I'm super passionate about. The question is this, Dan: should fundraisers prioritize getting their CFRE credential, and what kind of support does the local AFP provide for those who are interested? Do you want to start
Yep.
us off?
Yeah, so the CFRE is a Certified Fundraising Executive designation. It's an internationally recognized "I know what I'm doing" designation. Basically, it's a process that involves literature review and interviews and so on. There's a next step that's called the ACFRE, which is the Advanced Certified Fundraising Executive. However, the CFRE is sort of the benchmark for professional fundraisers in terms of a proven statement that you know what you're doing, you know the skills, you have the ethics, you have the passion project. So I would invite anybody who anybody who's got more than 5 years of experience or is planning to spend a career in fundraising to look at the CFRE designation from a learning curve point of view, or from a which book should I read, like they're all there, right? So there's study buddy groups as well that help you understand and look at things from a different perspective. Because especially if you've been in the same charity most of your career, you might not have the more oddball questions that the CFRE might bring forward. And there's a bunch. We talked about CRA, but sometimes you need to know which questions to ask in order to get the answer that clearly explains the situation. And whether it's the bottles of wine that Sam mentioned as a gift in kind earlier, or the fact that artists can value their own art for charitable tax purposes, like there's a bunch of wonky rules out there that are established for a reason, and the CFRE will help. So you can you can contact the AFP Ottawa chapter. I'm not sure who's actually running the CFRE study buddy group now, but it's certainly a good resource.
For sure. One of the best things I ever did for my career, I got designated in 2012, and I kept putting it off, and now I'm like, why did I put it off so long? It does involve quite an intense exam, and I've still got all the books here somewhere. But certainly, and I've had the pleasure of teaching it for AFP International 6 times, and a couple times through COVID, which was always a challenge to do it, of course, virtually. But yeah, it's definitely worthwhile, and CFRE is very easy to deal with as well in terms of adding in your education and adding in all those things. So definitely something to think about. We have
If
one
if
more.
I may, Sam, just
Yeah.
a last point I'd like to mention. It is one of the few internationally recognized designations that if you're moving from country to country, you're going to, well, you may not want to move to the States now, but let's say you're moving to the States or to Europe or something, the CFRE designation is a statement in itself.
Really good point. We have a really great question, and we've only got a couple of minutes. We're going to try and get as much in as we can. This is an anonymous attendee. As someone relatively new to fundraising, I'm looking to build a clear step-by-step strategy for effectively engaging potential donors and encouraging contributions. Could you walk me through the key steps you recommend from identifying prospects and building relationships to making the ask and follow up to ensure I'm approaching fundraising in a structured and impactful way?
Yes.
This is a whole other webinar, Dan.
It is, and it will not be answered in the next minute and a half. However, Hannah, or reach out to Hannah. Hannah's got my contact info, or it's not hard. Daniel P. Brunette at gmail.com. I have a volunteer everywhere, so you can find it. I'm not hiding online. You can find it easily. But yeah, no, I'm happy, and myself and a few colleagues, we still do a lot of free pro bono training for boards and so on, because we don't want, especially small charities and fundraisers, spending $3,000, on a 1 hour session or something like that. Just give us a call.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's there's certainly a lot in that question. And I'm just so happy at being someone that's relatively new to fundraising. You've already got sort of the idea that she knows, or here they know that they've got a strategy that they need to have. It is quite an intense question, and I'm sorry we can't get to all of it today. What an honor to spend time with you, Dan. How come we waited so long?
Well, we did cross paths at the airport when we were both coming class from different parts of the world. But
That's true.
yes, certainly, virtual is great, but like we said earlier, in person's always better, right? So
In person
we
is
should come
much
up for
better.
coffee or something like that in the near future.
Definitely will organize that. And for all of the attendees joining us from all across the country today, what an honor to be here with all of you. As usual, a big thank you to Hannah Rockburn, who is the glue that keeps us together here at the CBI. And next month, I know we've got another great webinar for you. We have them all year long. She keeps us well organized, lots of great information. And what I love as well, you can go back and watch portions of it. So we encourage you to do that, pass it along to someone that might need it today. I learned a lot from you, Dan Brunette. Thank you so much, my friend.
My pleasure being here, and look forward to crossing paths again with you and CBI.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. I'm Sam LaPrade. Feel free to reach out to me. I'm happy to hear from you as well. I'm on LinkedIn. I'm not hiding either. Dan and I are just out there all over the place. So you can find us. Have a great evening wherever you're coming from, and be kind to yourself. Thank you so much. Take care.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.